So I was on the way to the shop to make a mount for this touchscreen monitor I bought for my Langmuir Systems plasma cutter, and I stumbled on a old Dish Network antenna that was in a rating to be recycled. So I went over to the shop and I started taking it apart, and it has a lot of adjustability in it. Actually, it has 3-axis adjustability, so certainly we can use some of these parts to make this monitor mount. So I'm going to mount it on the end here, very close to where the original laptop mount is, and remove that guy. It was okay for the first year that I had this plasma table, but it's quite flimsy, and the old Dell laptop you see there wasn't able to run the latest version of Fire Control, so it was time for an upgrade. So here I'm just taking some measurements to make an adapter plate. I made 3 adapter plates. The left one is for the keyboard, the middle one's for the monitor, and the right one is for that attaches to the machine that we attach the antenna mount to. And we have a laser cutter over there, so I did some prototyping with hardboard just to check my measurements, and those all look good, so I decided let's just go ahead and cut one. So I'm using about 10 gauge steel here, and I'm first going to work on the monitor mount that goes onto the end, the left end of the plasma table. And I did all my modeling in Fusion 360, but I still use SheetCam for doing the cam work, and I was having some problems getting it so that it would cut the circles, the inside circles out first, so I had to fuss with it a little bit to get that to work right. And then I dry fitted things and checked my dimensions, and so now I'm going to cut a couple of these ears that bolt on to the end of the plasma table. So those all fit fine. So now I'm going to cut a little plate that has the 4 holes for the antenna mount. And here's a picture of the cut. So it's getting really good cut quality for this 10 gauge, particularly on the edges. It was like there's really good cuts with hardly any dross. So I clean these up with a floppy disk. I decided to go ahead and weld things in place. So I bolted on those little ears, and then I used a couple of mag switches to hold this plate on. Kind of got it centered where it needed to go. And I decided to use them just to make these on. I did a few tacks, and then I put a bit more in there, and I let this plate that I was welding cool down a lot so that there would not be any kind of movement as it cooled. And it was on there really tight, so it's got a really good fit. And I came in and put a few more beads on this thing to hold it all together. And I cleaned it up. So here's the trickiest part of this whole thing, was to try to figure out how to mount that monitor to this part of the antenna mount. I originally wasn't going to use the rest of it that have that little arm that sticks out that holds the receiver. But then as I looked at it, I realized, well, I could use that to mount the keyboard to, but it was at the wrong angle. So it's held together with these things called Tox clinching. My friend Ross told me this. He said, just drill out 2 of them, and then you can figure out what the angle you want and just weld it in place afterwards. So that's what I did. So then it was like, okay, how do we build it from here? Because I got 8 bolts to kind of deal with. I got to bolt a plate to this thing because this has got the dish is kind of curved, so I need a plate there, and then I need to mount the monitor to the plate. And the sizing of all the screw spacings kind of made that kind of a pain. But I got it figured out. I was using hardboard to kind of come up with a prototype, and now I'm going to just cut one out of, this is a lot thinner steel. This is probably 18 gauge. So just clean this one up, and I'm going to weld this. I did a little size check, and I drilled out the M4 screw holes, sanded off the paint, and then I'm just going to weld this plate to that other feature that was on the original antenna mount. And I had to drill a couple of access holes to be able to put the M4 screws in the back of the monitor. I got that all cleaned up, and it was easy to assemble, and I was able to put everything together. Now I needed to make a plate for this keyboard tray that came off the original laptop mount from Langmuir. So I decided I need to put it all together so we can get the angle of the keyboard correct. So this is kind of like a dry fit before we actually go continue on. Most of the people in the shop are pretty tall, so we got somebody to come over. My friend Rob, he came over and he said, gave me the position. I kind of marked it where it needed to be welded. I took it apart and I welded the angle, the keyboard angle there. I went out and painted these, and it was about 10 degrees. I went outside and painted them in the dark, and I'm cleaning up for the night. I use this thing called a bucket head wet dry vac to pull the water out of my table. And the next morning I came in, everything was all dry. So now it's just assembly time. I went ahead and drilled out the holes on here to give me a little bit more play in all the ways the bolts mount in. But that feature there was really solid. There was literally no play in any of that part of the design. You kind of have to build this in a certain order to get all the screws to fit, but once I got it in there, it's fine. So I'm replacing the laptop with one of these mini PCs. Got this from Beelink. There'll be a link in the description. I got this on Cyber Monday for, I don't know, $130. It's running Windows 11. And this touchscreen is an Asus touchscreen, 27-inch touchscreen. So I went through the whole thing with the Windows install, and now I'm ready to try Fire Control. So this part of the mount swivels, and it feels really tight. It doesn't introduce a lot of play. There's a lot of cabling up here. I ended up dressing that up a little bit. You'll see that here in a minute. So if you need to, you can move the monitor out of the way to load your stock. You can put it back over in any kind of angle that you want. The touchscreen feels really nice. It's a lot better. This entire mount is a lot stiffer than the original Langmuir Systems laptop mount. So here's the backside with everything dressed up. And this is the stow position. You can spin it back around and it won't be in the way to people to bump into it when they're walking by the plasma table. So that's about it. Well, thanks for watching.